again, this is the first time we've done this. We're the Service Design Network New York chapter. We can talk a little bit more about the SDN during the call, a little bit more. It's a global organization of people passionate about service design and the mission to really make service design the new normal across countries, across industries, across any sort of business. So that's who we are, SDN co-founders for the New York chapter. We'll get into more of that in just a minute. These are the folks that are going to be having their video on and going to be speaking. So you can focus on them in just a moment. We'll do some waves and the bios and everything. Again, I think I've said this quite a few times. This is our very first online event. We're typically in person in Manhattan. And so this is something we're trying out just in light of recent events. And so we hope we can connect with folks in their homes, just a total different way of interacting, very much a test. Just a couple more things to say. I think I have said this and you got an announcement as you were logging on. We are recording this session to share later. So we have everyone on mute and we'll keep it that way. If you want to do chats, you can. We'll be looking at that. We did get a ton of questions from people. We're not going to be able to go through all of them. We have discussed doing a follow-up event, also podcasts. That's something we've been really interested as a team here in doing. So we will answer them all eventually, but maybe not within this session in particular. We did affinity map them and group what made the most sense together and picked really our favorites from there. Again, Malin will be moderating in just a moment. And we focused it more on this community and our background of being co-founders of the group here. We do touch on obviously service design, a little bit about what that is and some more, so we'll get into that. And we will have time at the end for you to speak aloud. We're gonna, again, we're trying things out. So you can post in the chat for the entire session. We'll be taking a look at that as we can, again, brand new to us. And then toward the end, we might allow folks to unmute. And we're gonna try to take a selfie at the end, which would just mean if you feel comfortable to turn your video on, we can take a screenshot, as we usually close out our events that way as well, with taking a big group picture. So just to let you know a little bit more of the logistics, again, we usually run all our events in person. This is unique to our current scenario. We did postpone Shan's event to an unknown date as of right now. Spaces are not allowing big groups to meet, at least in the spaces that are our main sponsors. So I think that's a good idea given the climate, particularly in New York City. We'll let you know when we have more on that. We do have 2 other events upcoming. We're hoping by May that we'll definitely be back in person, April 14th. We may do something online or figure that out, but we have plenty of content that we really want to share with you. And we do really want to connect in person. We're just trying to be sensitive of just health concerns, not to be panicked, but to be diligent is what we've been told by our local government and all the people that I work for. So again, we still want to make sure that we get your feedback from this session. We would love if you could rate us through the Meetup app. So if you look at the email that you get at the end of all this, you can give us some kind of a rating and it asks you for a prompt of why you would rate us that way. That's all the housekeeping. So we can go through, I have these pictures of all of our bios, but what I want to do is actually stop sharing and you can just focus on our faces. So I'll get out of this and we could just go around and do introductions if we want. Who wants to start?
Malin, do you want to start or? Hi, can you hear us?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so she can go. I mean, I don't mind starting. I can introduce myself. Yeah. My name is Natalie Kuhn. I'm one of the co-founders of the NYC chapter of the Service Design Network. I also am a senior manager of service design at Capital One within the commercial labs. And I lead a team that's focused on associate facing experiences. Really, our associates are core to our business. And when we're working with other businesses, it's very much business to business. So I lead a team that's focused on associate experiences. And what else about me? I've been in New York for over 3 years now. Really excited to be here. I was in Chicago before, in California before that. Been in service design probably for the last 5 or so years. So that's me.
You want me to go, Kathleen?
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Sure. I guess I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen. I'm also one of the co-founders for the New York Service Design Chapter here. I guess a little bit about my day job. I work at another financial service. I'm pretty much the liaison between design, engineers, and business. I work in the technology management department. And a lot of the project I worked on requires me to work with a lot of different stakeholders, not just in my company, but different lines of business, vendors, and people all around the world. I lead the integration experience at my work and also some foundational changes we're doing at the bank. And my night job, I always say it's a service design chapter. Very proud to be part of this group. We have events on a monthly basis. So far, we have maybe close to 25, 30 events since we started almost 2 years ago. So I'm very happy to be here today. It's our first online event and excited to chat with everyone.
Cool.
Antonio?
Yeah, I got it. Hi, my name is Antonio. I'm a strategic and service designer. I have a background in industrial design. I used to do furniture back in London. Then I moved here, started focusing much more on co-creation, co-design, facilitating workshop, and this led me to be essentially full-time service designer now. I run my own studio. It's called Studio We do workplace strategy. And so we see the workplace from a point of view of intangible elements that leads us to work a lot in organizations that want to really adopt design, but they don't know how, from the point of view of processes, but also from the point of view of the governance that needs to be in place to for design to operate. And that's kind of mostly the work I'm doing now. I'm not really redesigning services per se, but I'm helping organization designing the right environment for services to grow. Recently, I also joined WeWork as a sort of like contractor slash link of the studio here in New York City. And we are working together. So WeWork is I think most of you might know, is a big service design agency in London. Is the first service design agency in the world. They started in 2001, so it was very exciting to join them for this project in New York. Yeah, so those are my already 2 full-time jobs. So running my own company, being the liaison of WeWork here in New York, and teaching design thinking full-time in China. So this is 3. So I don't consider the service design chapter. My 4th job is actually the time that I enjoy spending.
How many hours does your day have?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so like I split my time between practice, teaching, education, and obviously the community is a big part of it. And actually, I think we are going full circle because a lot of the stuff that I do with clients, it's really about building communities within a larger organization and also across organizations. So, I mean, I stop here because obviously I can talk forever, but yeah, that's me.
Perfect. And my name is Malin Fagerlund. I will be moderating the discussion. So I'm not a co-founder, but I am someone who's slowly but steadily sneaking my way into this community.
And you're very welcome. So.
Thank you, thank you. I feel very welcome. I feel very welcome, thank you. So I am originally from Sweden. I moved here 4 months ago with the Oracle, which is the company I work for. So I'm part of our innovation service, which is called Fuel, and we work with our own methodology to help clients unlock business innovation opportunities. So we have taken what we think is best out of service design, design thinking, lean startup, business model innovation, and all those other cool buzzwords, and created a method in which we work with. So my background is in fintech. So I was one of the first employees at a company named Klarna, which is the 5th highest valued fintech in the world. So we did fairly well. I've also, I have a degree in behavioral science and management, so that's where I come from, but I've always worked in technology. I love setting goals, and I write a lot on innovation and on goal setting. So if any one of you want to discuss those topics, I'm happy to do so. And I want to highlight the article about the last event that I posted today. So that is both in the meetup invite, and it's on my LinkedIn and on the Service Design Network LinkedIn. So please read and comment.
That's great. Cool.
Cool.
How do we start this?
Now you know who we are. Now let's get to the questions.
Perfect. All right.
Yes.
So we have a lot of questions, and you've been very engaged in coming up with them. We have gathered the ones that received the most upvotes in Meetup, but we've also had some questions coming in from other channels. So we're going to try to answer as many as you can. And we will leave 15 minutes at the end for live questions as well. So starting off, for those of us who don't know of this community and who don't really know of how this all started, that's going to be our first question. How did you all come together to start this group, and what were the first steps?
We all came from slightly different angles, and we might all remember it differently too, which I'm gonna love to hear this. I met Kathleen at an event that was based around service design, and we were asking folks, okay, what other events can we go to? I was new to New York and trying to figure out what we could attend and get to know the service design community, and it seemed like there wasn't a lot that was regularly happening. And then Antonio, you had actually reached out when we launched a survey, and the survey was polling folks online about what would you want to see event-wise if we hosted additional events. And you'd said, like, I really want to help. And so it was kind of like Kathleen and I had met in person, and then I actually met Antonio through, I think it was like Facebook or something that you reached out.
I mean, also the jam, yeah.
And the jam was later, but originally,
okay.
well, maybe I saw you at the jam. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But yeah, we all remember different parts because it was a long time ago. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
I remember. Yeah, go on.
oh, okay. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I just remember it was about 2 years ago when I think back then, like if you want to find a service design event in the city, I think, you know, if you Google it, wherever, you can only find the global service design jam. And there was not much like going on in the community at the time. So then, that's how we kind of started thinking about, oh, you know, there must be people out there who are also interested in this topic. And we started doing all this different, like reach out to talk to people in the community to see what they're looking for. And I remember the first event we had actually was at a bar. Yeah, and we just launched a meetup event and see how many people will come, and that's where we can gauge how many people are interested in this topic, and that's where we started. And since then, we grew like from I think 70 people at a bar to now we have close to 2,000 members on our meetup. Yay!
Yeah.
Did you say 70?
So yeah.
Well, we had 70 sign up, but when you do free events, usually about half drop. So we had probably like 30 to 40 at the bar. It was pretty noisy. We found a way to bring people together through social bingo. So getting people, I think that's something that's always been really important to us for the community, is not only providing content as best we can, but allowing people to connect and really get to know one another and get to know their backgrounds. So we had social bingo, about 30 to 40 people. And then we also had a lot of post-its, because you can't have a design event apparently without post-its, of getting feedback of what people would want in events.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just had something that is around, I mean, the feeling that I had at the time, which is, I mean, I was surprised that there was a lack of an actual community or meetup at least here. Coming from Europe, I know that the service design community in pretty much every city or major city sort of develops spontaneously. And I think that's because, I mean, we have like smaller organizations there, and like service design is very much based on on consultancies. And so it's much more dynamic as a group of people that move from one consultancy to another, so everybody knows each other. And yeah, I was surprised that this wasn't the case. And then I suddenly I soon realized that that's because we have like very, very big organization, and generally we have in-house service designers. And so the community doesn't have many opportunity to sort of meet because they're actually internal communities to the organizations. And so I think this was very interesting to me. But at the same time, I think there was really like a lack of moments where to discuss certain topics. And service design really, if you also look at the research around service design and all the conferences, I mean, they all revolve around communities, like strong local communities. And I think so this aspect was something to build, and then we just decided to do that.
Wow. So that takes us into the second question, which we may have already answered, so we'll see. The second question is, why did you decide to start this group and start hosting events? So it sounds like it was about community and it was about sharing knowledge and networking. Was there anything else that you were looking to do? Does that summarize it?
I think I'm just gonna finish my previous answer.
Sorry.
Which is, no, like by answering this one. What was the question?
Why did you decide to start?
Oh, why? Well, I mean, I think service design is something that is like, I mean, of course we have books and stuff like that, but it's a very emerging discipline still. Like it's not, I mean, we are like a very young breed of professionals. So I think the idea of discussing it's crucial to the development of the practice. So it's not just like, oh, we do our job and then we do this extra thing just to socialize or to network. I mean, in the case of service design, this is really like how you, most of us, I guess, develop our practice and how we really also find work, and so I think that there was like a strong motivation for me, and I knew that a lot of people was in similar place, and so I mean that was my motivation basically.
Yeah, I would just add to learn from others. I think I might replace networking with more like bonding with others who are in similar scenarios or are trying to start up a service design group within their industry or their company. So I'd say it was like really hearing other people's stories and having more, again, it seems so far our in-person events have really been our bread and butter of like bringing people together, not just to discuss the content, but to have that more free-form time before and after the event to get to know other people in the area that are really passionate about service design or interested in getting involved in some way.
Yeah. I definitely say learning is my main motivation at a time, because like there's resources online, but I always find that in-person conversation or, collaboration makes a difference. You learn so much in the process. So learning is definitely something that it's the main motivation behind all this. Yeah.
Perfect. Third question, individually looking back, what has been the favorite event you've hosted?
I love this.
Oh, wow.
Natalie looks so excited. I think
I love, if Andy's still on, I've really liked the service safaris that we've done. We've done 2 now. He's been really one of the core facilitator, organizer of that. And essentially what that means is we've gone to different locations. First, it was the Central Park Zoo and really assessed all of the services. What I like about it is that you give people a prompt really to evaluate something in the real world, and they get to work with a small team of 5 or 6 people to evaluate that, to brainstorm how they would make it better. You can come together as a bigger group. So I really liked the tactical nature of the service safaris. We did one recently around different pizza places. And so people visited 3 different pizza locations in the city and then evaluated them, compared, and so on. So I would say the events that are most interactive, I would say Antonio, yours and Jing's was another favorite, of making physical small spaces.
I'm not surprised.
Not humble at all about it. But I would say, yeah, the most interactive ones have been my favorite, but it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah. I also really like the service safari. Another reason, just aside from the interactivity and learning, is that, so earlier I think we didn't really get to mention this. So besides the three of us, we actually have a core team of volunteers that have worked with us along the past 2 years, actually. So most of those events, it's not just the three of us that came out together. A lot of the events is actually a collaborative effort from this group of people. So Service Safari is an example that we get together and actually have working sessions, and we produce a program, and then we do like all these different like prototypes or things that for the event. So it's quite amazing that this group of people that we have together, we're able to put together something that we create from scratch, I would say. So definitely one of my favorite events for sure, or programs, I guess.
Yeah, I think the safari is great because it really like touches on, you know, doing real, you know, action research in the city, and like, I mean, is like service design in practice, which is, by the way, something that even when you work for a client, sometimes doesn't even happen. So it's kind of a strange thing. So I mean, really like doing it, going in the field and do research is, yeah, it's just kind of like probably the future of what we should focus on doing. But I would also give a different perspective, which is the one of hosting people. So we had a couple of, well, we had a book presentation that I moderated with Adam Lawrence of Service Design Doing. Then we had Ends. What?
The Ends.
The Ends, yeah. And then and then we had we had like, you know, speakers that come and bring things that they are either like working on or a book in those cases, and it's something that I think it really opens up the conversation. And most of the time, these people are not even New York based, or not even I mean, not even from North America. So I think those moments are super important to open up the conversation. And I also noticed that when you bring in such an external perspective and point of view, it's really when you start kind of like unlocking new way of thinking and new perspective within the community. So I think the service design, the safari is amazing in terms of connecting with the city, but I also think that the external speakers are a very super important component of what we do.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So taking a step back, that was some more information about you and about the community. So I'm assuming that most people on this call are fairly aware of what service design is. But for those who aren't, how would you define service design?
I'll go last. No, just because I know already that I have a completely different.
Well, if you have the best way to summarize it, by all means. I mean, I have like a sentence or two. I mean, for me, it's bringing together people, process, systems. A lot of what I think about when I think of service design is actually a service blueprint. How can you design for all of these things working together? And I would say when it comes to different flavors of that, when we talk about customer experience, user experience, sometimes it puts one of those groups at a more important, like we had one speaker on Kita, I don't think she's joining tonight, but talking about putting one group on a pedestal. And I think with service design, it's really about making all of those things work together successfully. And there's some great videos that we can share afterward and some books that we're happy to share. But to me, it's people, processes, systems, and people when it comes to those who are receiving the service, and also designing for those who are providing the service, which I'm very passionate about being in the associate experience space at Capital One.
That's a very comprehensive explanation. Mine is really simple. Whenever I think about service design, it's all about how can we empower our customer or end user, or like audience, however you want to call them, from enabling the service providers or your employees and all that. Because a lot of times I see people design things or come up with an idea, but they don't think about how people who are building or making or developing are going to support this process. So I see a lot of great designs out there, but they're not sustainable, not from the environmental standpoint, but from an organizational standpoint. And a lot of things don't get to be implemented the right way because we're not designing for the people who are providing those services, products, or websites or phones or anything like that. So that's how I think about service design. That you have to. I'm sure people, if you're familiar or heard of service design, there's front stage and backstage. So you really have to design for the backstage in order to enable the people in the front stage as well. So that's how I think about it.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree.
Antonio, it's your turn.
Oh no, I mean, you kind of I mean, you summarized basically like my vision on that. I think there's been a very strong focus on user and customer experience and empathy on understanding your user, which is crucial. But at the end of the day, designing services means really work on the provider side, in the sense that you cannot really, and you shouldn't really change the way that users think and behave. And so you can just kind of design an interaction around that. And so the tricky part is how do you structure an organization to offer that type of experience? Mm-hmm. And that's complicated, and it's complicated partly because it very quickly become something else. It very quickly become change management within an organization. It very quickly become what are the tools that we use. So we start kind of designing methods and tools instead of designing the services. But the goal is to design the service itself. So then it become a very complex body of work. But it's really about designing organizations that are ready to provide great experiences for their users.
Thank you. So that was a little bit of background on what we think service design is right now. So if we look a bit into the future, how do we see the landscape of service design evolving? And especially after the acquisitions that are made by large companies.
Okay. So I think there are two questions in there. So I think one question is where service design is going in terms of discipline, and I think the other one is how service design practices are transforming to serve very big organizations, so big that most of the time they are even acquiring them. So how do you basically do service design is the second question, and how service design is evolving is the first question. I will try to answer, I will try to throw some ideas there, really. I think we are, and that's also something that we sensed a little bit in the last global conference. Again, this focus on user experience is something that essentially colonized the first 10 years of service design. But we start realizing that understanding how the user thinks is not enough, because of course you can kind of create great experiences around that, but they tend to be very extractive experiences, meaning you try to extract as much value as possible from your user and from the resources that you have. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because of course there is a more systemic type of understanding that you need to acquire in order to design sustainable, that also the services that are also sustainable. And so I think a lot of conversations that I'm having with people that are much more experts on service design than me is okay, how do we embed sustainability within systemic sustainability within service design? And so it's about looking at your user, you're looking at within your organization, but also looking at the ecosystem that you are operating in. And that's actually a very hard thing to do because, I mean, as a company, you tend to preserve your own space and not looking outside. So that's one thing, and that ties up with the idea of how do you measure the impact of service design. I'm not gonna start that conversation now. I don't even know if it's a different question later, but so yeah, measuring some metrics on service design and systemic approach rather than organizational centric approach. I think those are the two keywords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the measurement is something that, at least in my organization, has become really interesting. Also, it's a very much, depending on the size of your organization, a phased approach. Like, you don't just start doing service design one day. It really comes from the organizational structure. It comes from the culture. It comes from whatever silos might be currently existing. So I would say when it comes to trends around service design, I feel like it's like, first, we still are in that space of we need to figure out even how to use it and what to do with it. And then I feel like shortly after, and this is for design as a whole from experiencing and talking to different people, is how do we measure it and how do we make it as an equal to technology, to here we have product. But when you think about that innovation with the 3 circles and desirability and design, like how do we make that as equal as the business and the viability and the product, or I should say the business, the viability, and the tech and the feasibility. Like, how do we make that an equal and make sure that service design is in that discussion as well? So I guess that's my 2 cents, is like, I feel like we're still figuring out what to even do with it and how to make sure that we're actually practicing it. And then once we can get there, I think looking at measuring it, and we can also share some of the talks and what we've done about like global trends around service design. But I feel like in our local area and in the United States, it's really like, how do we just start doing it and go from there?
Mm-hmm. Well, the trend I've been observing is actually, I see a lot of like designers. When I call designer, they were trained as, let's say, graphic designer, visual designer, or UX designer. They're transitioning into service design. But nowadays, I see more business school like students are actually trying to learn service design, because essentially, a lot of times that you do need people to speak each other's language in order to get things move forward. With that being said, service design, the trend that I'm really seeing is organizational change, which a lot of times it requires to have a service design mindset. And in addition to that, to the second question, where a lot of larger companies are acquiring smaller design firms, consultancies, and all that, I think it's a really great thing to happen in the industry, because traditionally, even in my own company, we hire consultants from, big agencies and things, and they come in, but usually they don't get to stay for too long. They stay for 6-8 weeks, and they give us a lot of suggestions or pain points and things that we kind of already know. They just make it templatize or structure, into a really nicely done blueprint. But the question is, how do we carry forward? How do people like in the organization start adapting to the change and all that? So with the acquisition of those agencies to larger firms, I do see that will be a benefit for bigger companies to go through transformation, having the in-house people with a mindset and teach each other what service design really means. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So we actually did have someone, me, asking the question about metrics and how do we link the usage of service design to financial business value. And it only got 3 hearts, but I think that all of you have touched upon it. So let's cover it briefly. How do you do that? Or how do you link it to business, the financial business value, or other KPIs?
Still figuring it out. I would say, Antonio seems like he knows.
I think I think the theory around that is clear. I think how to do it, it's harder. I'm currently doing that actually, and I'm doing that within like a very, very big organization, like huge. It's an organization that doesn't have metrics, because that's just not something that, at least doesn't have customer-centric and business-centric type of metrics. Of course, you can measure like your revenue, but there are no metrics around the experiences that you offer through your services. And so having kind of like got my hands dirty a little bit around this idea of metrics, I think at the end of the day, what happens is that first of all, they come from the sort of like outcomes that you want from your user experience. So I mean, any user experience satisfies certain jobs to be done, and those are the things that you can measure. Like how good are we to provide that type of experience in that specific moment of the journey of your user. Now, how do you do that? That's really tricky, but it comes down to essentially like research techniques. And I think if you have a solid framework on how do you do research, then you can apply the framework also inside the organization, and you can treat metrics as things that you need to discover. So, you know, who is in charge of that specific interaction? How do they offer that? How do they understand if it's good or bad? Where are the data that you know, I need in order to measure that certain thing? And so it's to a certain extent is a research exercise.
Yeah, I think it's picking what metrics you want to change. And it is very closely related to the research. So it's like, what is the baseline experience? How are you measuring the success of that? And then what do you hope to influence by making certain changes with service design? I think you can't see it as a blanket, like we've applied the service design over the whole problem. It is like really targeted metrics that you're looking at and really targeted service design solutions. That just means it goes, again, like my mind goes to the service blueprint, picking like a slice from that. Like you're not going to implement literally everything and be like, I wonder what changed, but it's like picking a phase, picking a part of the process, and just going all the way through from the customer experience, from the front stage, the backstage, the systems. Like pick a slice and start really small and think about the bigger picture. And maybe we can apply this in other places, but it's focusing on what metrics you want to lift in that very specific area and then applying that outward.
But then I mean, that's why also I think it's really about having like a research approach to it, because then you'll notice that there are some metrics that enable certain results more than others. And that's like, basically like, that's kind of an insight, right? Like that's how you form an insight. You understand a lot of things, you have a lot of learnings from your research, but then there are some combination of those findings that create like a aha moment. And then you understand that that's maybe the key metric. And so, I mean, you need to have that approach. Like it's not a mechanical approach of like counting each, you know, performance of each, you know, slice of the blueprint. Is more understanding what are the weights around the different phases. I just shut up now.
I think metrics is a very difficult thing to measure and implement. Every organization is different, and every team is different. Every reporting line is also different. So I think it all depends on, like, at least the way we do it is to look at what are the firm's key objectives this year and sort of break it down to different sections and timeline and things. And at the end, we do measure customer satisfaction score. Annually we do send out surveys and things to do that. But we also measure employee satisfaction in the company as well. But sometimes I have to be honest with you, I feel like those scores don't really represent everything that we're trying to do. So I definitely think that we need to figure out better ways to measure it, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so that's an agreement at least. We need better ways to measure service design.
Well, I mean, we need like, I think we need contextual ways. I mean, I think there is like because I mean, like, I think the comparison is like digital metric, like, you know, metrics to measure digital services. And those are kind of pretty standard. And I mean, they are based on interaction, on, you know, digital interaction. And so they're easy to count. Mm-hmm. They're less contextual. Yeah. I mean, in organization, like purely service design metrics they just depend on, as Kathleen said, they just depend on what you are measuring. So they're like kind of ad hoc to the organization. So in that sense, we need to but yeah, it's true. We need to find better ways to have like a more shared framework around how you go about building them. It's about building them. It's not about knowing what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one comment from Emily saying that it sounds like the metrics are also heavily dependent on the industry the design is serving.
And then I saw Christopher Edwards was talking about the role of for service design in a moment where social distancing is the hot new idea. I want to actually save that one maybe for our 15 minutes at the end, but I do want to acknowledge and thank you for the question.
That's my job, Natalie.
Oh, sorry. You said one comment. I was like, I saw two.
I saw that.
Okay. All right. So, so if we don't really have a great way of measuring, how do we sell or market service design to stakeholders that we work with or that you work with who may not be close to the field? How do you explain value to them?
It's a journey.
Yeah,
you go, Kathleen.
Yeah, it is a journey. Actually, a lot of times at work, earlier I said that I'm the liaison between design, engineer, product, all that. The reason for that is I never actually say that I'm practicing service design at work, because most of the time, I think it's a semantics issue. The moment you say service design, and my team will be like, we're not, designing a service. We're not really doing a service. We're doing a product. We're doing something tangible, or whatever that even means. So most of the time, you just have to apply the mindset and methodology into your day-to-day work. You don't necessarily need to tell people to buy in, but the moment, say, that you start working on certain optimization for a process, and then you start caring about your internal employees' experience and how we can, let's say, optimize flow or minimize mistakes and all that, then all of a sudden people start seeing the value of it. You don't necessarily need to tell them that, hey guys, let's practice service design, or let's do service design blueprint. Yeah, that's the way I approach it. And I don't know, I'm interested in hearing what other people do actually.
I think, I think, you're right. Like in theory, if you have metrics, like clear metrics, that's like, it's easy to explain why you should do a certain thing. But I think service design doesn't really sell like necessarily better performances. I mean, service design is change. I mean, that's what you're trying to sell. And like in organization, you might have like a huge variety of, what's happening, Kathleen? A huge variety of...
My husband just dropped his phone. Sorry, guys.
Oh, no.
Go on.
I was saying, in organization, you might have a huge variety of different problems that might be completely unrelated to performances. And so, I mean, if, I don't know, like a business leader understand that well, yeah, if someone in an organization, or even a business leader, someone in an organization understand that a team or like a department is working in a way that is like not efficient, maybe the problem is that employees don't want to stay, and then they cannot generate like a trigger effect of an inefficiency within the company. So it's not really like, okay, that team is not delivering. It's more like people are unhappy. So it's not about measuring happiness. It's about making people more happy at work. And so I think you sell change. That's what you try to sell, and then you basically explain and show that service design and design thinking in general is a way to really understand the problem in its complexity, and that's something very difficult to do in organizations. And so, I mean, that's kind of my way.
Yeah, I want to just say +1 to both what you guys said. I'm not surprised that nobody said, I just tell them how great service design is and show them a case study. I definitely feel like that's not the way to do it. And I originally, when I came to Capital One about 3 years ago, I actually thought that was part of it. And I quickly learned it was not, but I was like, oh, I need to like show them how it's worked through decks or through explaining. And it's like, you just need to do it. And I know that's been what some speakers we've had have talked about in the past is really service design doing. And again, not giving it a title, especially with this industry where there's design thinking, there's design in all these different languages and words, and it alienates people from what you're actually trying to do, which is make change. And so I would say really picking different methods to start using, again, very similarly, starting small, and we do one activity or one way of implementing these changes to the service, and people will start to take notice and see that that was successful. And in some ways, I feel like you're selling yourself as an individual who, well, that person has all these methods and ways of doing things that we haven't done before, and it seems to be working. And I actually, with a teammate here, that was our experience working together. We'd been working on the onboarding experience of bringing new customers into the bank. And he was kind of like, all these things that you're doing, is there a name for it? And almost it was like he, without saying service design, he was like, this is different from the way that we've worked in the past, but I see success in it. And then it was nice how then whenever there was a problem, he's like, that thing, we have to do service design. Is that where we can put service design? Can we do it here? And then it was kind of funny because then he was trying to use the term probably too much, but I do agree. It's not by telling a story about service design. It's about picking a small way that you can start actually doing it. And then in hindsight, in retrospect, you can go back and explain that a little bit more to your team as needed. But I would say, like, pick a method and start using that and weaving that into a new way of working, and selling a +1 to the change that we're trying to create. And it's not about just using service design because it's the right thing to do. It actually can help you create change within an organization, and then for who's ever receiving the service as well.
I also want to add that, I mean, I'm a big fan of destroying narratives of the service design community. And one big narrative is like, oh, how do you sell service design? Like, I think that's, it doesn't happen. I mean, I don't know, like, you don't need to sell it. Like, in the sense that you'll have for sure a leader that basically wants service design for whatever reason, maybe the wrong reason, I don't know, but like, that's generally how you get your entry point. Like, the idea that you knock the door of a big organization and just kind of like pitch service design, it's just unrealistic. It just doesn't happen. I think what happens is that you have someone that is sponsoring you, that wants you to start doing service design in there, and then you start, and then what you actually need to sell is the value of service design to different stakeholders, because those are the people you need to work with, right? You need to kind of navigate the system, and there are a lot of people that don't decide the fact that you are there, but they'll have to give you things, either their time or their availability of some resources or some information. They just need to kind of like be collaborative, and in that case, then you need to kind of like explain them why they are supposed to offer their time to you. And then it's true, like, I mean, showing how you do service design is the best way, but then you actually also understand the different stakeholders, and to some, probably maybe like a deck presentation is the right thing to show, you know? So I think all these ways of showing service design, they're all valid. It depends who are that you need to convince, but I mean, you won't convince a leader to give you a project. I think that's just like, that happens through other things. They happen through conferences, they happen through like literature. I mean, that's kind of like why also we start communities, because somehow people kind of get exposed to it in a wider context, and then they understand the value of it. So I'm really against the idea of like, oh, let's find the best way to sell service design. I mean, you do need to have a way, but that's not how you build that moment of exchange.
So it sounds like you're focusing a lot on people. So who would be my
relationships?
Partner? And who are the team that could help me? Yeah. So one question that we're having in the chat right now, I see you see it, Natalie, is from Kara. Freelancers, they need to sell service design. Do we have any tips for that? Because showing is expensive.
Yeah, I was freelancer until yesterday, basically. I think, well, I mean, I think service design is a complex operation. There's no like, it's not like graphic design or UX either. And I know that now all UX people are gonna say like something about that, but like it's, I mean, it's basically like an orchestra, right? So there are like many people working together, and that together they do some service design, which means that you'll have a lot of components, and some of these components are, I mean, the first component is user research, and I always suggest to people that maybe they're starting or they're freelancing to really sort of like nail down their research techniques, because agencies, bigger agencies, or even like very big companies, they are in need of people that can just kind of plug in, do some research and leave. And that's the easiest way to freelance, essentially. Same goes with for prototyping and testing. I mean, just kind of like pick one thing you're passionate about, and then I mean, try to either specialize or maybe kind of clarify your portfolio around that. That doesn't mean that you don't know the entire process, but I mean, even as an agency, you hardly gonna work on an end-to-end project. So you'll have to have your entry point, which is like your kind of core expertise, whether something that you, for some reason, you are better at, or like maybe just something that you like, and then, you know, kind of say, okay, I'm very good at that, I'm fast at that, I'm cheap at that, whatever, and that's your way to sort of like build some relationship, and then you start doing that, and then, I mean, research ties to prototyping and so on, and so then you are in the industry at one point, and then you start doing everything.
Mm-hmm. So find your skill and learn how to do the full method.
Yeah, because you're always gonna be able to plug in into wider projects. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. Anything else for our freelancers on the call?
I haven't been as bold as to go freelance. I've worked for agencies, Fjord in particular, that they, well, I won't go into too much detail about them, but I mean, really positioning themselves as a service design consultancy, and people coming to them knowing to some extent what service design is, or having a sense. So I can't unfortunately speak as much to the freelance, and now I'm in-house, so sorry.
Yeah. I say when we hire contractors or consultants to work on service design related projects, mostly we look at their background either in financial services or they've been in consultancy for a long time. The reason being, again, I think earlier Emily kind of talked about, like in the chat, she said, oh, it depends on your industry things. And I do agree to a certain extent. There is a benefit of being the SME, subject matter expert in certain space, because there's a very complex way of working or regulatory reasons. So when you kind of know a specific industry or know specific like ways of working, that would be really helpful to sell your skills to companies that are looking to hire freelancers.
Can I destroy another narrative?
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay. So I completely agree with what Kathleen said, but so I need to be careful. So
No, don't. It's a small group. Go for it.
It's being recorded.
Okay, no, because she really described a situation that I experienced, and I did a fairly big project for financial institution in the past, and now I'm working on an even bigger project for another financial institution. And of course, it's true, like the traction that you get by even showing that you've done something in the same industry is very strong. But that doesn't mean that I know anything about financial services. Like I literally like don't understand anything that's going on in my journey. Like you get into some sort of surreal situation where you are there in charge of the process and you try to understand what the service is about. And it takes like months to even understand what's the actual service I'm designing. And so like that just kind of like to go back to the advice is like, don't be intimidated by the idea that you don't know much about like a specific industry or a subject matter. Just like that needs to be in your portfolio. Like the processes, the HR processes that lead you to do a project, to do work, they don't really go so deep into content to really understand if you actually understand about the subject matter. You like they barely understand if you understand the process. And that's not to just say that things are broken. I mean, this is just how organization operates. So it's just like a system that you can hack and you can kind of like get entry points. So yeah, just specializing in industry, but I think it's more like your portfolio needs to be framed around the industry more than you actually knowing. Because I mean, every project is different anyway. So I mean, of course, you can kind of like save some flavors of the culture of certain type of organizations, but I mean, just kind of be brave in that respect.
Yeah.
All right, moves us into the question of how has the practice of service design evolved within your organization, and what has been challenges and what has been successes?
Oh boy. I was just talking about this today with someone actually, and just looking at the last 3 years and thinking about when we came into this, not really knowing what was ahead of us in the sense of what had to change organizationally, structurally, culturally. I work for a part of the bank that is probably the newest or youngest to even working with designers. So it was quite a process of introducing designers as strategic partners versus those who would work through production and would more take orders to push pixels, and positioning them into a place of more, again, partnership versus a resource. And so for us, it started with introducing designers as a partner. It then began with doing research more extensive than analytical, like looking at the analytics of site traffic and really talking to people, talking to our customers directly. So I feel like there was a lot of groundwork, like foundational, like setting up practices, setting up belief systems around what designers do with you, not necessarily for you. We've done quite a few reorgs to actually change the way that our business, we often get in this bad habit of showing our organizational structure to the customer or to the person that's experiencing the service. So we've broken down a lot of those silos and actually reorganized ourselves to be more successful working together with service design in mind. So to reiterate, like within our journey, we've done a lot of the foundational groundwork, and we continue to come up with more of we have a vision of what we want to be doing from a service design perspective. And it's all about breaking that down into smaller pieces and trying to figure out how we need to change as an organization so that we can be successful in moving forward in that. But I feel like I got excited about talking about the journey, and I don't know if that, but the other rest can, and you can tell me later what I missed, but you guys can talk.
Sorry, I was reading the comments and I actually missed the question. The question was, what are the challenges we face?
The question was, how has the practice of service design evolved in your organization, and what were the challenges and successes?
Oh, okay. Well, for challenges, I definitely have to say, I think I also kind of mentioned this before, from the organization standpoint, reporting line makes a difference. Because when you work with your business counterpart, technology counterparts, or whoever, different stakeholders, there are people who are genuinely excited to try different methods, but there are also people, due to their specific reporting line, they have a specific way of working, and they're in their line of business or departments or specialties. So different reporting lines and culture definitely has been more challenging, I have to say. But the success story is still, actually, this week I had a really good day. The other day that, I guess today, Tuesday, I guess it was yesterday, where I literally saw a stakeholder made a presentation based on front stage and backstage without knowing it.
Nice.
And I was looking at it, I was like, ooh, that was nice. And at the end, I just jokingly said, I was like, does anybody know what this is? And nobody said anything of that. Whatever, it's fine. But he did it right, so I was very happy. So there are definitely times that people are picking up how things can be done, even without knowing the right terminologies or, getting I guess, official training or education in that sense. So there's still hope, guys. There's still hope. Anyway.
Antonio, any input?
Well, I mean, the question is framed around practices, like service design practice within your organization, but I don't work, I mean, I work for organizations, I don't work within an organization. Yeah, but I can speak a bit to maybe my journey of like starting a design process from scratch, essentially. 5 years ago. So, I mean, my studio started really like me and my business partner doing trainings and teaching service design mostly. And then what happens that we started getting projects out of the training that we were doing. And then we started getting traction and kind of like doing bigger projects. But I think, I think maybe I touched on that before. I think the perspective that I got and like kind of tracking the requests that that we are getting for clients is really moving service design to a space where you can work within the organization in a much more embedded way. Like 5 years ago, it was very common to work on a model where you're a consultant, you kind of like do a few workshops, and that's how you're supposed to fix problems. And lately, I mean, we barely do 1 or 2 projects over like a 6-month or 1 year commitment. So what we do is like we work very embedded with the team within the organization. So like even this idea of like, in-house or consultancy model is kind of like wobbling because very often it's kind of like a hybrid way of working. And I think this is something that probably 5 years ago was really hard to achieve. I mean, we weren't really proposing it, but I think also clients weren't really ready for that. And lately, I mean, I think this is a much more accepted way of working. And then again, on the point of really focusing much more on the foundations of design within the organization. So starting from like general framework and the theory around service design and how these kind of affect how do you build teams, how do you hire new people. I mean, all this kind of design operations layer, it's something that I think it's evolving a lot compared with 5 years ago when I started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. So there was some questions regarding service design implementation and service design in larger organizations. Now we're going to move over to a question around remote working and very, what do you say? Very
relevant.
Current, yeah, very current.
Right now, exactly.
Yeah.
So the next question is, with the current COVID-19 or the coronavirus, and the subsequent practice of social distancing, will it spur companies to improve the design of their remote services and or the increase in remote services in general?
Yeah. So I mean,
this is a very hard one.
we had an interesting conversation today with some colleagues that were noticing that, like, okay, I mean, this morning I had this meeting and there were like 10 people and very different offices, and even the people in the same city, they were actually working from home. But then the meeting was really, there was a lot of engagement and like, I don't know, there was like some sense of like passion in what we were doing. That was strange for an online meeting. And I think my observation was that when you substitute online for face-to-face, as a sort of like plan B, it doesn't really work. But when kind of like digital collaboration is your first choice, I mean, it's kind of like different, like that it's your priority, you make it work, because I think the technologies that we have available today, they are actually very valid. And I think we probably use all our online tools like at 50% of their potential. So, I mean, I think it's possible. It's just a matter of prioritizing it. And really, I mean, design, I mean, another thing that is happening now, they are canceling all the workshops. So like, again, I just told that, I just kind of said that I'm not doing workshops anymore, but I mean, it's still open to the workshops. And, all the workshops that I plan for the next 2 months, I mean, I'm just getting cancellation every day. But then actually like 2 or 3 days into the crisis, clients are getting back to me saying, oh, actually, we are thinking to do it online. I mean, did you have experience with that? What are the solutions that are available? And so it's about restructuring the agenda of the workshop or any type of work session around those needs, it's very possible. You just need to reframe the way you plan work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there is a space for that in terms of like new tools maybe, but I mean I think mostly there's a space in terms of like new facilitation techniques that you know they are still pretty unsophisticated, I would say. And I do also teach facilitation, and so I can tell there is not much around facilitating, especially facilitating online.
Yeah, I would say you really have to be intentional about it. If you, and it also can't be as much of a mixed group, because then you kind of seem to go one way or another. Like I'm working a lot right now with a team in McLean, Virginia, and a lot of them, I would say actually the majority are in person. And so for me being a remote participant, or if I'm facilitating, you really have to consider how do you get everyone on a level playing field so they all agree upon really the rules of how we're going to engage together today. We're going to be diligent about how we're interacting with one another. We know what tools we have. I feel like it's just being very much like setting the boundaries going into whatever it is. And agreeing to commit to it, I would say, as teams right now in particular. On top of this, we recently changed what partners and locations that we're working with. So we made some really great partnerships with some teams that we've been working remotely with them for now 3 years, and it's fine. And we know you turn on your video, this is how you can communicate. Everyone's looking for the communications coming from the different people. They know where to look, they know what to use. I think the tools exist, but it's about agreement of the people involved with how they're going to be communicating. If it's some kind of a working session where we putting our notes, like you can have some really engaging sessions remotely. And again, the tools can always be better. We can always have some dream tool that's coming out next. But I think it's about the team agreeing and all being on the same page about this is how we're going to engage. Everyone pay attention and hold one another accountable. We talk a lot about locational bias. You're more biased to listening to those that are right in front of you. But when you try to remove that and try to be really much like, what did you say, Kathleen? Oh, what did you say, Antonio? I think he was trying to speak, like really trying to come together in that. And that's more with like a mixed in person or not in person. But I think agreeing on how you're going to engage is key, and then staying committed to that and be accountable for how you work together online.
I work with remote team in India actually every day. And what I have learned in this process is that the best thing to do is obviously all being in person. We literally fly people to the US for a week or so just to work on something together, because you just get it done so much quicker. But in the world of, that's not possible, meeting out every single day. What I have learned is that if you do work with remote team, different topics or workshops, you need to have at least one facilitator in that location as well. So someone can be your partner in this process. And there are also times that we would decide to do all remote or all in person. So even if we're in the office together, but there are some people that are not, so we all decide to just do it all remote, like all at our desk. So then it's a little more fair, because I hate the moment that say if I write something on the whiteboard, somebody doesn't get it because they're online and have to show them, and it just takes a lot of time. So I guess with this coronavirus situation, I know my firm and a lot of firms are probably already trying what it would be like if the whole company worked remotely. And so far, I think it has been going pretty well, given that the technology is there today. And I saw someone wrote Mural. Mural is great. And if there are designers here, a lot of times we also use InVision freehand that we can quickly just like doodle and draw something as well.
They all have to have access to the tools also. That's something to consider going into it. Different disciplines, at least where I am, have different access. So pick something that's more basic than Mural. We often use Google Sheets, which we're lucky to even have Google Sheets here. But that's something that we tone it down to like the least common denominator. If everyone has a Google Sheet, then we can all be there, and Mural maybe is for design meetings because they all have access. So think about the access to what tool you're trying to use.
Cool. So that was some relevant remote working tips and tricks. We have a few minutes and 2 more questions before we're going to move over to the questions we have in the chat, and if anyone have additional questions that they want to ask live. So we need shorter answers here. We have 2 more questions. We're going to try to get
I
through.
promise.
And 4 minutes. So the first question is, what are some fundamental hard skills that aspiring service designers should practice?
I think facilitating a good conversation is very important. You work with all these different stakeholders, business, technology, designer, whoever, senior leadership. You really need to be a good communicator. Okay.
Good one.
We have 4 minutes left, I know.
Go, Natalie.
Oh boy. Yeah, that, and I mean, some kind of ability to zoom in and zoom out of a scenario, like being able to really like look big picture, what is this bigger problem? And like, now we're gonna get really specific into this one area. So zoom in, zoom out, maybe some ability to like research to some extent. I'll stop there because I don't have a solid facilitating is important. Sorry.
I would just point out that those things that you mentioned, like both of you, they're great,
skill.
but they're not skill.
I don't know about needing hard, like you mean like using Sketch as a hard skill?
I'm
like
joking.
I know how to
I'm
use
joking.
a tool. I don't think it's about the tools at all, actually. Like, so when you say hard skill, I guess I struggle with that. Like if facilitating isn't a hard school, a hard tool, and like what is a hard tool?
A skill, I mean, like for instance, visualizing. I mean, like the act of like sketching maybe is like the pencil is the tool, right? So yeah, it's not, you can also use a marker, but the skill is visualizing, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, that was just like to kind of tease you guys. I was recently at Parsons listening to a Ezio Manzini talk, which he talks a lot about, he talks about social innovation. He's one of the major experts in social innovation. But I wrote a book called, I need to get this title right. The book is called Designing When Everybody Designs, and he talks about the relationship between design expert and non-design experts. So meaning like designers that facilitate groups of people that are supposed to design, but they are not design experts. And I mean, one of his points, which is like super kind of like very simple idea is the fact that if you go in an organization as a designer, you're supposed to bring design skills, which means you need to kind of visualize and make stuff for the people that are not able to. And I think that get lost when you kind of work in a space where you are supposed to bring all this kind of strategic thinking. And it's true, we do bring strategic thinking, but I think it's super important that you help the people that work with you to actually sort of like make and visualize things. And so it's about creating prototyping, is about using Keynotes and Illustrator. I mean, all the basic stuff. Of course, it's not the end goal, but those are all things that are needed in order to give substance and to really kind of, materialize all the strategic things that the group is doing. So, yeah, I mean, of course, I come from a perspective of like a person that always studied design for his entire life, and now I'm kind of like, in relationship with this world of business that I'm kind of like constantly learning about. But I think if you come from business or other kind of like paths, and you learn to design, I think it's a very important thing to sort of like try to upskill your, kind of like classic design skill, so to speak.
That was the shortest answer I've ever heard.
I had to compensate with your like lack of art skill.
All right,
comment.
we have one more question. Attention, please.
Okay, sorry.
And this has been on the chat as well. So the last question is around also getting into the field of service design and staying up to date on what's happening. So are there any trainings, conferences, or favorite books on service design? What are resources that you want to share with our community?
Conferences is a bit tricky at the moment.
No conferences right now. Yeah, that's right.
Well, maybe Copenhagen, end of the year, October, maybe we'll be better by then. That's the Global Service Design Network Conference. I love the content of that. We have short answers. So yeah, Service Design Network Global Conference. Maybe it'll be happening.
And Serve Desk.
It's in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Serve Desk is also a great design conference, service design conference. Slightly different focus than Service Design Network, but they're both great. So, I mean, of course, we are Service Design Network, but Serve Desk is great. And the community is really overlapped. So I would check those two to start with.
Any books? Any
Yes.
other resources? Yeah.
This is Service Design Doing. This is Service
Doing.
Design Methods. Those are my two favorite ones. Not biased because we had some of the authors come and speak.
Yeah. I mean,
I haven't read that many books, to be honest.
There's
It's
an
one of my
adaptive
New Year's
path
resolutions, guys.
one. There's one on blueprinting by Adaptive Path. Not biased again, since Capital One bought Adaptive Path, but it has some great examples.
yeah, those are all, method books. I mean, I think it's very important at the moment to read about sustainability and emerging technologies. A lot of paradigms are shifting, so I think I would focus on those things. I mean, the methods are important, but they change all the time.
Can I say one more book?
I
It's about
agree.
organizational. Actually, just keep going. I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay, we're getting a lot of links there on the chat too, so feel free to share with each other, and we'll save them and put them on Meetup.
Yes.
All right, moving over
Oh,
to
sorry, one more book.
one more
Just
book.
one
Yes.
last book. The End. Like this author, he actually came to speak at our
Oh, yeah.
meetup. He
Yeah,
talked
he's
about
very good.
designing the end of the experience. Yeah. People think about onboarding, but he think about offboarding. So yeah. Okay, no more books. Sorry.
We'll add them to the meetup group. Okay, so the first question from Christopher was, what's the role of service design in a moment where social distancing is the hot new idea? So I think we've answered that question, right? When talking about remote working.
I think so.
I think so. Christopher, you need to write in the chat if you disagree. Okay, next question. Good examples of a service design blueprint and the differences between public service design blueprints from corporate.
I don't think there's a difference between the blueprints between corporate or public, whatever industry. You might have different, we often call them swim lanes, but like the groups that you're including, and if like what you want to have to make up the service blueprint could be different, but it's not related to what industry or public or private. A service blueprint is service blueprint. And examples, I'd say that Adaptive Path book is great if you search service blueprint online.
Yeah, I think service blueprint, I mean, as any tool, they're just ideas. I mean, they're just like the way you frame your thinking. So, I mean, the way you represent that, it's very relative. So first of all, just kind of like make sure that you are in this type of mindset. Second thing I would say, think about the goal. I've done some blueprint that are completely focused on back-end operations and barely have all the type of information included. And then I've done some blueprints that are super focused on metrics. So the back-end operation is not even understandable. And then some, their current state, future state. So, I mean, it's really like, what's the goal? What are you, it's like a picture, like what are you saying with that picture? What do you want to say? And that informs the way you build it.
Yeah, I think you guys cover it all. It's really case by case, but the blueprint is there. You have to modify it accordingly. So then you can speak the same language to your audience.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would add when we're talking about service blueprints, some people use it. I typically start with the current state, like what is currently happening. Some people will create ones that are like what we want to ideally have happen. So I would also make sure, to the points that have been made, that you're on the right time period. Like you should definitely do the current state first, and don't try to design something without understanding where you are today.
Good. Next question from MB. Could you speak about how to apply service design in the startup or small starting out business in process of acquiring customers? Okay, so we talk about service design in the startup world or small businesses, and especially on acquiring customers.
Yeah, I tried that. It didn't work too well. I mean,
You can teach us what not to do.
it's just like, yeah, startups are tricky because they, for a number of reasons. Like, first reason, they are really, most of them, they are really product centric, and service design is not. And so there's a little bit of contrast in the agenda of service design and the agenda of the client generally. The other thing is that they're really fluid organizations where, they grow very fast. So you might kind of like start a project and in a couple of months, the configuration of the organization is completely different, which is something that it's hard for service design because you don't have your core team to work with. So yeah, there are a number of challenges, but I think there are also a lot of experiment cases of design thinking mixed with lean startup that are quite nice. I think especially in the customer discovery phase, lean startup is lacking. So you can just use more service design. And then, in the development phase, on the other end, clearly design thinking and service design are less fast than lean, or even kind of like less fuzzy, more fuzzy, lean startup is really kind of focused on that. So yeah, I think maybe the general suggestion would be to kind of like be very agnostic to methods. And yeah, you come in as a service designer, but you really need to kind of mix methodologies and kind of borrow things from other places.
All right. Any other?
I would say we have an individual, Jesse Grimes, I mentioned in the Slack. He has an article on this and he does a talk on it as well. So I would search for Jesse Grimes and I would search for startups and service design. He's really passionate about that area and has been doing a lot of research around what's happening there.
And actually, one of the last issues of Touchpoint Journal is all about service design and startups, I think.
Okay. So I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. Or
there was one from Greg about starting a community based on what you're passionate about. And I would say, given our story, it was pretty much find some other people that have a similar interest in you and I don't know if I would do it alone, frankly, like if it wasn't for the two of you guys and then the other folks who help us regularly and who we met through the jam. I don't know if I could have done it by myself, frankly. So I would say find a couple other people or one other person that's really passionate about whatever subject matter and throw an event, pull people online. Like there's some really, I would say scrappy things that we did in the beginning just to pull interest. And then once you have enough interest, it's like getting a space is difficult in New York City in particular, but you don't have to have a huge space. You could go to someone's house. So apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely say just like try it out because like I said, I still remember our first event was at a bar. We really had no idea what's gonna happen, to be honest with you. So we sort of things just go from there. So I think the best advice I would say is, yeah, I agree with Natalie, do it with someone else, but at the same time, just have to try it. I always hear people say that, oh, how did you do it? And actually recently, a friend of mine did ask me, she wanted to start a tech meetup. And then she's like, how did you do it? I told her, just do it. There's no such thing as how did you do it, just do it. And then she did it, and actually it's a pretty good turnout. So you just have to do it, you just have to ask. Yeah.
You can use Meetup pretty easily. I'd say maybe you have a question about like, well, how do I, like you can use Facebook groups, Meetup, Eventbrite, but like get the word out to the people you want to invite and it can start really small.
I think another thing is like listen to the community in the sense of like, of course, listen to what they want, but also like people see you in strange ways. Like sometimes people tell us, oh, you guys do this. And then that description that they give is like, no, I don't know. Like, no, we don't really do this. Like, oh, we don't do this for that reason. And so, but, you know, sometimes they come up with like, you know, versions of what you do that are actually interesting. And so it's like about being open and say, okay, maybe I'll adapt to that vision, you know? Like now we do events at EY. And I mean, pretty much the thing went like, oh, you guys kind of like do events and bring events to organizations around your city. I said, no, we just kind of like do, well, eventually, I mean, they have a great lab. We did our last event there. It's like, hey, we can do that, you know, like, it's not that we don't do that. It's just that it wasn't really in our plan, or like, that's not how we define how we do it. So just listen and just kind of like go with the wave. And I mean, because I mean, that's something you can do as a community and not as a business. So like, just behave as a community. So kind of very organic. Don't plan too much. And that's, Natalie will kill me on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But one more thing I do want to add here, actually, is like thinking about what is the problem you're trying to solve. Because definitely at a time we realized that a lot of people share the same pain points. We did do a lot of research by talking to people, in fact, going to different events, meet up, and to see what is missing, I guess. So then we kind of go from there. We also did some pretty strategic things too, like such as like researching on like what are the similar type of events, when do they happen, and then so we pick a day that won't be on the same day, so then people can actually come to our events, and choosing location that's more centralized for people after work. But that's like later stage. But I think in the beginning, maybe ask yourself, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and do other people have the same problem?
And also be open to change, because I mean, like your community is learning, but you're maturing or you're learning, and so like after 6 months, maybe you need to change things, because like that's like you kind of cover something and you just want to go to the next step. So we always try to kind of, maybe it's not even visible, maybe it's just in our mind, but we always try to sort of like cover new things and create new formats and stuff like that.
Great. Well, Antonio, Kathleen, Natalie, thank you so much for all of your insights and smart comments to all of these questions. I also want to thank all of the participants, and I see especially that that we have the Joan on, who were speaking in our last event, and I'm going to share the article in the chat now.
Yes, thank you.
From the last event. So feel free to read
Thank you, Malin.
comment. I'm also print screening all of the suggestions that you're giving each other, so that we can continue and share the content and the resources in the meetup group.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we could still answer a couple questions. I don't know if that was winding up for a close. I mean, we could still see to test the technology if people do want to see if someone unmuted and used their voice. I also want to try to take a selfie at the end by turning on all our videos and screenshotting it, just because we love taking a photo at the end of our events. But if people have a few more minutes, we could maybe try what it would be like to do a live question. I don't know, maybe that's too hard.
Can you, do you have the authority to open everybody's microphone?
I do, but I'm just scared to turn everyone off mute. They're like, but they can turn themselves off mute.
I know.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm not turning everyone on. It's gonna be like mass chaos. We could just like, if people feel more comfortable in this is not necessarily. I will also say,
if someone wants to do a comment or ask a question.
We have a raised hand. People are using the tool. So yeah, let's go by raised hands. Nazia?
Hi, everyone. My question is, what's your favorite tool to create service blueprints?
Ooh.
Okay.
Excel. I'll be real. I think that a service blueprint should be interacted with. And so using something as basic as Excel or Google Sheets that allows everyone to add to it is ideal. If you're doing it for presentation for some reason and you really want it to be not accessible to others, which I don't recommend, but if it is some kind of like giving away thing, I mean Sketch or Illustrator. But
totally.
Same here.
Yeah.
Any other raised
hands? All right, should we try the selfie or any other raised hands?
No more raised hands.
Yeah, we can do this. Before we break and do the selfie, I just want to thank everyone again for bearing with us. We may or may not use Zoom for the future. We made the decision on Friday to cancel our event on Tuesday or really pivot to this. And that was just a short notice of spaces. Do not want to have 65 people sharing pizza right now. So I hope this was helpful. It was really great to visit you guys in your homes. But yeah, we can go from there.
One neat thing about Zoom is you can do breakout rooms for small discussions. I don't think people know that about Zoom, but Zoom has the ability to create breakout rooms and then have people discuss on those and then come back to the main room. It's a really cool part of Zoom.
That's great to know.
Actually, we thought about it. Yeah.
I know.
But I was like, maybe for the first one, let's just try it for next time. But great suggestion.
Yeah, that's good to know. We did talk about that. Yeah.
Thanks, Christopher.
So should we try a screenshot group? And it's only if you feel comfortable, if you want to turn on your video, and then you can see everyone that was joining.
Except Andy. Andy, you're ruining the selfie. That's not.
Kitty. Is that her?
Open your camera. Let's show Andy.
This is so much more fun than before.
Don't go away until we have everyone. I feel like we'll have a
Thank
few more
you guys
people.
for turning on.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a picture. It looks like people are still coming on with their videos. So now you can see all the faces of the people. This is super important for us to feel like you've made a human connection. So we got dogs, we got cats, we got cool backgrounds. I'm like getting so ready to just make that.
I see some post-its finally.
What? I think that's everyone who wanted to share. Smile.
Cheers.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this evening. Stay healthy, wash your hands regardless of where you're from. I know people may not be in New York City, but thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you another time.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, and please give us feedback. Thank you.
Yes, feedback.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.